This is the Body Wise Podcast. Thank you for joining Laura and Christina for another intimate exploration of collective wisdom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Body Wise Podcast. This is your host, Laura, and I am sitting here today with someone very special to me. His name is Derek Warriner, and he's the man I married 10 years ago. We split up about 2 years ago, and we are currently awesome co-parenting partners, family, friends, confidants. The reason that I thought it would be kind of cool to bring him on the show was to talk about our pretty unique family situation, primarily how we manage our separate lives, yet raising our family very much together and very much in a united way, because that is what we wanted to provide for our kids. So we do not have the classic story, the divorced couple situation where we don't talk to each other or we split things up and don't share. And I mean, it's uncomfortable. It's not any of those things. And we're pretty proud of it at this point. So I thought, let's get Derek in here so that we can talk about this from a more, I would say, a man's perspective. From in retrospect, I've found so many leaders and public, like authors and guides, women, primarily all women actually, that have shared something maybe similar in a way, like a really cool co-parenting situation with their ex-partner. But there aren't any men's voices in that collection. And I thought, you know what? I think that's really needed. So
well, I speak for all men on the planet, and thanking you for allowing a man on the show. I'll try not to offend any of the sponsors out there.
Well, we are open to all genders here and all life experiences, Derek. But yes, you are speaking obviously from your own perspective, but I think in the realm of relationships and vulnerability and talking about bodies and sex, like we've done so much on the show already, we have a lot of predominantly female perspectives. So it's kind of refreshing and exciting to have a very vulnerable topic like relationship, breaking up, creating a new family dynamic, kids, and have that conversation with a man and a dad. So I'd like to start with kind of the beginning when we decided that splitting up was the best thing for our family, for ourselves.
Yep.
It was a conversation that I remember we had one evening.
That you started, that I may never have had the courage to do on my own. So thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. But I also could not have expected a better response. I mean, a more positive response. I think going into it,
You thought a positive response was me crying for an hour?
No. But I was very much connected, I think, to the fears that you might have. Like, what is this going to mean around time with our kids? Like splitting up a family and how that directly impacts our relationships with our children. Because I knew very well that the thread that was holding our family dynamic together at that point was our investment in what our children. Yeah. So I thought, go ahead.
Well, when I realized when you brought it up and I kind of acknowledged that within myself, the first fear or thought or acknowledgement in myself wasn't time on the girls. It was, how are the girls going to react? What are they going to think of me? I mean, there's not much more important to me than how our daughters see me and feel about me. So I was terrorized by the prospect of them being disappointed in me or just not having good thoughts about me and what was happening with the family. Yeah, it was terror. That's how it felt. Although, I mean, yes, I'm thankful that you had the courage to bring it up. But once it was said and stated and out there between us in the moment, I knew that I had been feeling the same thing for a long time. So I think you probably felt some of that too.
Yeah, I did. I felt that. And at the same time, it was a relief to meet your, I guess, your relief. Because I think there was a sense of that, of like, okay, you said it. I agree. There was this immediate, I agree with what you're saying, which was not exactly what I expected. And after we said that, I think we began our process of, okay, well, what is that going to look like? And that's kind of where it got tricky, didn't it? In the actual, okay, there was the conversation. It was put out there.
Well, I don't think the tricky part came until we had to figure out finances. I mean, the first thing that we did was you started, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the first action item was that you started looking for houses. Isn't that kind of was the first step?
Yes. We started looking for houses initially for you. Yes.
Well, house.
Like another place for one of us to live.
Right.
To be able to separate.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. Yes. Because in theory, the other one could stay in our old house and we'd figure it out.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So that was the first step. I don't remember that being so painful once we acknowledged to each other what was happening. And there was a process of looking for a house.
But soon after that, because I think it was pretty much almost at some point it was simultaneous where we said, well, I mean, we brought up the word divorce.
You brought it up.
Okay. And there was no counter from you. It was like, okay, find out. It was, okay, we get divorced now. What does that mean? What does that look like? What do we? So, okay. So in many cases, I felt like the researcher kind of side work. Okay, I'll find out about it. I am the researcher. And that's always how Derek often refers to me, right? Like, well, you're the researcher. Find out. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did do some research and I looked for a family-centered lawyer. At least that's the way that she advertised her practice. Because from the beginning, I think both Derek and I, because it was something we agreed on, nobody was in disagreement about splitting up. We're like, all right, well, we get along in this. We agree on that. Let's just move forward, hopefully agreeing on things. And it could be smoother than most. Now,
I also, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I also think that you were much further down the road within yourself of thinking through a divorce, wanting a formality and closure to the marriage than I was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think because I had already gone through the process that I had to go through to reach the point where I brought that conversation to you. And in order to bring that conversation to you, there was so much that was going on behind the scenes within me, right, to get to that point of taking action. So I definitely was. I would agree with you there. So let's talk about, I mean, I will say from my part, because I do want to start talking about some of the challenges. Like, okay, great. We agree. This is something we want to do. We both know that our children are central. We want them, like, what their experiences of this is the most important thing. And I would have to say, just from my end, that the most challenging part of this was actually going through the formalization of a breakup. Like beginning a conversation with a divorce lawyer is what brought up the financials, which is what became the hardest, kind of the thing that struck you off balance.
Yeah.
And that was the wedge, I would say, what started causing us to drift apart further than we were as a couple that was already deciding to split up, right?
I mean, you could say drift apart. You could say want to light each other on fire. Yeah, whatever.
Yes. Yeah, and that's very violent in thinking, but I'm not a violent person. I don't condone that. But yes, I get your point. The
extreme anger. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So would you share a little bit about that? About your we want to get real about how you can go from appreciating someone for speaking up and doing the brave thing to wanting to, be just not look at them.
Well, I didn't maybe I was in denial. Maybe I didn't see any reason to get my own lawyer. I just expected things to be easy. We didn't have any disagreement about splitting things. We just assumed that we'd split everything 50-50 and come to an agreement on how much money that, it would take everyone to live, and then make decisions accordingly. And I just didn't expect that to be difficult. I thought it would be really simple. And so I didn't have a lawyer. Basically, you had a lawyer, at least you had a connection to a lawyer. And the first thing that your lawyer asked me to do was fill out a series of financial forms, and so very detailed financial forms with regards to my income. An important part of the process, because at that time, my income was the sole source of, the family's livelihood. And so I filled those out. I took great care to fill them out in detail, as far as our income, broken it down by, I'm in sales in the healthcare world, and how much money comes from my salary and commissions and bonuses, and where does the insurance money go for our healthcare? And I did all of that in addition to a kind of a budget for my expected expenses, at my new house at that point, and then gave it back to you and your lawyer to review. And so that we could, I think at that point, just, this is what we have. This is what we need. Here's our expenses. This is how we split it up every month. And then that's it. And I submitted that back, and then just waited on, feedback from you. I don't know, a couple of weeks later, when I got that feedback, it was clear to me that neither you nor your lawyer had taken care or time to look at what I had prepared. And the reason I know that is because when you finally gave me the, this is how much money I'm going to need per month, had I honored that, I quite literally, and this is not exaggerating, I wouldn't have had enough money to buy myself groceries. And that just I was upset. I got really mad, and I wrote a lot about that in this article that I'm preparing. But I was sitting in a Starbucks, and I can remember screaming into the phone and yelling at you and hanging up and crying. And this, I don't know if I've ever told you this. Did I tell you about the guy next to me in Starbucks? He obviously was, a party to what was happening with me in this public place. And when I pulled my head up and kind of wiped my eyes, he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Shoulders back. It'll pass. It'll be okay. Shoulders back. Take a breath." And it was quite a moment with this lovely, strange stranger in Starbucks that went through that moment with me. That was really terrible. That was the low point for me. Not only in what I felt, because I just felt so disrespected and demeaned by your, demands, but also a low point in how I behaved and how I reacted and how I lost my temper, which I don't ever do, very rarely do, ever in my life. So.
Well, yeah, I definitely remember that as well from obviously my end. I remember that I had such a difficult time understanding the financial breakdown of this process, because I had to actually fill out all of the same forms that you filled out as well. And my lawyer sent me to speak to another consultant that did like specifically financials, that was more skilled in that realm. Because numbers is definitely not my thing. And anybody who knows me, I love language, I love words, but oh my Lord, help me with numbers. And there was this relationship in our marriage, this dynamic where, I completely gave all responsibilities around our financials, including the property that I have in Miami before we got married that was under my name, to you. And, like so many marriages do, like you handled that and I handled everything that had to do with like the girls' health and appointments and doctors in the house. And, I was just taking care of them and home. And that's kind of the way we had split things up. So, and we didn't really talk often about financials except when it was our family budget and we were making specific efforts. And I trusted you completely in that regard, like 100%, whatever you told me that this is what we're going to do with the family money now, or this is what we've got to, or this is what we have extra to do something with, I never questioned it. And then all of a sudden I'm in this room with people, I'm going to say with more than one person telling me that, when you're going through a divorce and you're going to need this person in your corner, this lawyer, and your partner is going to need their own lawyer, and somebody's going to be watching out for you because you need somebody to watch out for you. And, they have so much experience, and even with marriages that they seem to have gotten along well, in the end, this kind of brings out the worst in people, which it does. I mean, it does bring out the worst in people. We know that. And when we had to start writing down how we're going to split up, not just our money, but the time with our children, like what holidays go to who, because you have to fill that out. Even if you decide to change it, you have to turn some kind of paper in. You remember that?
I don't remember that part.
Oh God, yes. I remember her saying, it doesn't really matter. You just fill it out. You have to put something that the judge can look at because there's children involved here. It's not just the two adults splitting up. So you can decide whatever it's going to be, but there has to be something in writing. And that alone, like, something in writing just made me feel really uncomfortable. And the immediate pushback from you in terms of financials, like from the get-go. And because I had, again, it was a vulnerability of mine. And at that time I didn't feel like anybody was really holding my hand through it, or there was transparency and openness because you were feeling attacked. So you were feeling attacked. And so our communication about that was completely severed. You were on the defensive, and me not being somebody who like that comes easily to money language, numbers language, was at such a disadvantage.
Well, there's no question that my mind went straight to what we're all conditioned to do. We have society has these expectations about divorce and who's going to play what role. And we're going to be competitors and combatants over that. And those feelings are exacerbated by, the advice and counsel that people get from lawyers, just like you were getting. Someone needs to look out for you and protect you. And so I did feel like when I heard your, request or demand or whatever you want to say it for how much money you needed monthly, I felt manipulated. I felt as if you and whoever you were talking to were, even though it doesn't make sense now, looking back at it, it doesn't make sense because I know who you are. In the heat of that moment, I felt like, you and these other people I didn't know were really trying to take advantage of me. And so when that happens, when someone tries to take advantage of you, what do? You stick up for yourself. You defend yourself. And so that's what I did. And, again, now we're competitors.
Yeah, in that moment, which is horrible because I wouldn't consider myself a competitive person by nature. And I didn't know how to be at war with you or anyone else. And in that moment, what it felt like to me, of course, in that moment was that you were very scared of losing all control, that you wanted to be in control and in control of the money. And that's how you like to be. And any kind of challenge to that, you were not going to accept. It was like, there was no leeway there because testing that or challenging that, we had been in a marriage for so long and you had been in control this whole time and you weren't willing for that to change. So it felt like now I have to challenge because there's a very unbalanced control, like domination energy happening here. And that felt like, oh my God, I need to rise to that occasion and push back on this. Like you say, all of a sudden, this is somebody that I have to fight against, that I have to defend myself and be stronger and bigger and show up, because he's trying to bully me and crush me and to protect himself. And
well, what you say about control, I don't think there's any question that's in a lot of cases in my life true. But I think we both thought a lot about this. In this scenario, with this specific example, I don't think that's what was happening. I know you thought that's what was happening, and I respect that. And I totally understand why. But it was really simple in my brain. Okay, these people, they want, I mean, literally, if you broke it down, your request was for roughly 85% of my monthly income from my job, which again was the sole source of our income, and I get 15%. And it was as simple as that in my mind.
I hear you. And again, in my regard, just like it was your experience, there was no manipulation happening on my end. And I was really trying to grasp at the straws and the guidance that was being thrown at me, and the one that was present in my life, because you weren't my guide and I had to be my own guide. But we were doing something that we'd never done before. We were breaking up. We were potentially getting a divorce and moving through separating a family financially. So if there was no like clear one-on-one cooperation and teamwork between us, then someone else was going to guide me, because I needed that. Just like, you need a coach in a sport that you've never done before. You need guidance, right? And I think it was so stressful, and it was so damaging. And like you said, you think back about it now, and of course that's not who I am. And I remember being on the phone with you and saying to you, remember who I am. Remember who I am, like who you're talking to right now, because it felt like we were
No trust. And it was so bad that at one point you went and got all the money out of the checking account.
I did.
Not because you needed it, but because you thought I was going to take it all and not give you any.
Right.
You were terrified that was going to happen. I think that speaks volumes to where we were at that time.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
It's so crazy. It's so insane. And all right, for listeners, like, what the hell changed? Like, how did we get out of this? How did we get out of this horrible feeling, which at this point, of course, it was impacting our children. I mean, not directly, because we would never do this and have these arguments in front of them.
Never.
Ever. They were never around.
But I think we're intuitive enough to know that it doesn't matter. They're receiving all of that energy, whether they want to or know it consciously or not. Absolutely. There's no doubt we were both feeling that. And I was feeling tremendous shame about it already.
Yes.
Because I knew it.
Me too. It was unbearable. And I got to the point where I just felt so overwhelmed. I was in my house, in this new house that I loved, this wonderful little house that I had picked out and that we had moved into, and Derek and I had figured out an arrangement with sharing the girls that felt comfortable at the moment. And I was so miserable and hurt and struggling. And I just thought, okay, I don't know what it was, but I decided to surrender. Not to surrender to Derek, the enemy, at that moment, not like that. I'm talking about like the spiritual surrender, the surrender to life, that I am going to stop because my body can't take this anymore, because the stress on my body was just showing up, and the fight and the angst and all of these really negative emotions. I just couldn't do it anymore. I didn't want to do it anymore. And I had this feeling that if something didn't change, if we kept at it in the same direction that we were going, I mean, there was going to be a point of no return. That's what I was afraid of, that between Derek and I, there would be a point of no return. And I looked around this house that I love, that I'm still living in. And I thought of my children and I thought, okay, what's the worst that could happen? I know that Derek would never let Emma and Leah, our children, go without, he's always going to take care of them. And I have a family. I'm so lucky to have a family that supports me and will support me 100%. Whatever needs to happen. Even if that means that I'm left with nothing and I have to go back to Miami, which of course Derek would not want to do, but what the worst case scenario, I am lucky enough and privileged to say I have a safety net. I have a safety net in my relationships with the people that love me. And I am not going to fight. If this is hurting. This is hurting, and there's something here that doesn't feel right. So I'm going to surrender. I'm just going to stop. It just means stillness and trust that somehow, in some organic way, life will unravel in the most perfect way. And I'm not going to be pushing anymore.
And at that point, you called me and said that if you agree, we don't have to get divorced right now. We can just put that aside and, try to get back to what's important for us. I think, is that your recollection?
Yes. I think the stress of the divorce on our financial well-being, saying, look, we don't have to do that. We don't have to separate money and numbers and things. And let's figure it out. Let's just figure it out, us, with no one else involved. Just let's get back to that. And then down the road, when we're in a healthy place, we can, reconsider what we want to do, but let's just do it our own way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what absolutely released the pressure for me. That just, after that phone call, the tensions just all released.
So when did you start liking me again?
I don't know. I don't think that I ever stopped liking you. I just lost touch with, I just lost being grounded and connected to, values and what we want to teach our girls and the way that we always talked about, we probably spent, a year in different forms talking about different ways of having a relationship, and then finally splitting up and what that was going to look like and what was important, how we were going to manage our relationships in regards to the girls and our new home settings with regards to the girls. And then, all of that was just like violently pushed to the side and all of this, anger. But again, once that dissipated, then I think we were able to slowly get back to how we wanted to manage our new lives together, slowly. And I don't think it happens overnight that you go back to establishing trust, from going to a bank and taking it all out to just going back to, what's mine is yours, what's yours is mine, and vice versa. I think that, that all that probably naturally just took some time.
Yeah. But it was also very much a choice to say, you created a budget and I trusted it. You said what I really liked was that you sent me an email with like details sharing, like, this is what I make. This is where I spend, this is the money that I would be using to spend this much on groceries, or roughly this on, the membership stuff we have. And, this is what there would be. And this is what I'm thinking in terms of paying mortgages and covering costs and groceries for both houses. And I would say that I guess at that point I had no choice, because I made a choice to surrender and to say, okay, let's see if this way works out, and to trust you. And at the same time, I learned to speak up and to express the things that I needed.
And it did change along the way. We have made tons of adjustments on the fly along the way when we needed to.
Absolutely. And that was something that we had never practiced before because we didn't need to. And I think also one of the things that, even from the beginning, even when we were not getting along, my house was open to you. When it came to the girls, like, you would come and have dinner with the girls. And I want to share that because we didn't just agree on, okay, we're going to split times and days. The idea of having a fluid, like daddy can put you to sleep, daddy's here for dinner, you guys go swimming in the pool together at my house. And there's this kind of easy back and forth where we told our daughters, we are going to remain one family. We just have two houses. And that's what we told them. That was one of the things we said when we told them what was going to happen and how our family was going to change. Mm-hmm. And even through the really rough parts where there, of course, we felt tension. I felt the tension in when we were in the same space, but we were both still dedicated to, we're cooking dinner with the girls. You're sitting down playing cards with them at the table. I'm serving you a plate of warm food just as I'm serving them a plate of warm food, even if I want to hit you on the head with the plate of warm food. But I'm still, there was this act of love underneath it all. And I think the act of love was showing up for our children, showing up for them and going through the motions, not letting what was happening between us affect that.
Why can't you come to my house?
Because
you don't like my food? Why does it always have to be your house?
I do like your food. I do like your food most of the time, but I like my food more. Uh-huh. And I do go to your house. I go to your house to watch movies occasionally. Yes. I mean, it took us a year. It took us a year to develop a friendship after that low point and kind of coming back together, figuring things out. It took me a long time, I feel, to feel loved by you. I felt so rejected in many ways. I felt rejected often when we were married. And then when we broke up, I went through this other wave of rejection. It's so interesting, as much as of inner work and personal work and how ready I was to split up. There was that little voice in my head that was like, oh, it was easy. He was ready. He doesn't want me. He doesn't want to fight for this at all. Just like an affirmation of not being wanted in a way. And I mean, that was something that I now know that I carried with me, as much as I thought, this is what you want, Laura. You want this other life and you want this freedom and these opportunities to be fully yourself. And that's so true. And what I learned is that actually both of those can exist at the same time. This paradox of kind of pain and healing, and also hope and really ready for something else. And I think there was nothing more to do but allow behavior and action and time. I said to Derek recently that I've never felt more loved by him than I do now, ever. Than I do now, like more appreciated and seen and cared for than I do now.
Well, thank you for saying that again. I agree that our relationship has changed profoundly. We are closer. The way in which we communicate and share with each other there's much more depth to it than we ever had to any part of our relationship while we were living together in a conventional marriage. Maybe why is a whole nother, podcast or topic of conversation, but that's something I'm so grateful for. It's really incredible how it's all evolved and changed. There's no doubt. And for me, and I've written about this so much, it's not just the relationship. It's that I've gone through so much change interpersonally as a part of this process for the better. Skills that I've learned that have had far-reaching consequences in every part of my life, from my work to my family to my friends, that I have learned and put into practice in my life because of going through this and what I had to change about what I wanted to change about my own behavior going through this process. So I'm just really grateful for that.
Well, let's leave listeners with, if you were to say, like, in a simplistic way, what one of those kind of like a core lesson of that process, something that like a core tenet of what you learned, one of those skills,
Yeah.
what would that be?
To let things go. When I look back over the course of my life, when I think about how I move through the world and how I interact with people and I deal with problems, if I feel disrespected or I feel wronged in some way, in the past, I really tend to hold on to that, hold on to it in my mind, allow it to dominate my thoughts and my actions. Done that with friends, with you and our marriage, with my mother and my sister and my father. And there's no doubt that through this process, I have made a choice that I had to learn how to let things go. Things that were not important, things that were not aligned with my priorities. I was spending so much energy and thought into just holding on to all of these negative things and thoughts and emotions. And it really affected my life in a negative way. And I didn't, until this happened and we went through this, I didn't realize how much that was affecting my life negatively. And, I think it's taken a lot of just reflection and writing in my journal and talking to you, but it's a big thing to change and a new skill to learn. And again, it has had far-reaching implications for not just our relationship, but my entire life. Just the ability to let things go. Someone insults me, something I don't like, I now have kind of the inner tools to figure out how to just let it go and not dwell on it. And I know that sounds simple and it may be really, really easy for some people, but it is not for me. So that's the big one for sure.
Well, thank you. That's very powerful. I would agree with deepening those skills within myself throughout this process as well, and feeling really actually deeply grateful for everything that I've learned and who I am now today. And for you, very, very grateful for you. Thank you for being on this podcast and talking about this with me today.
It's been fun.
Good. Well, until next time, viewers, have a beautiful rest of your week.